Hello everyone, this is Charlie, Jack's better half. If you like the episode, please do consider giving us a like and subscribe if you're on YouTube, and a follow and a 5-star if you're on Spotify. It really does help us out. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy.
Even just a welfare standpoint, we've got Krugman, who's the daddy of trade economics.
Never say that again.
Right, hello everybody, welcome to That's going to be in. We're getting that. Incredible. I could not have hoped for better.
I was taking the mic.
That was tragic, Charlie.
It was just that. That'd look good. I was trying my best. Isn't you? We've been away for so long. I want to look my best. We're no longer just radio voices. We're now on the internet. So, got to look good for the fans.
You can look great. I can't believe we got that on camera, Charlie. I'm so happy.
I can't
genuinely.
believe I did that on camera. What?
It was the eyes. It's the concentration.
Yeah. For our Spotify audience, missed that wonderful moment.
Right. Okay. I don't even know if we need an intro now because that was just so good that any comedy after that is just going to be wasted. Sure. Going straight into it, Charlie. Today we're talking about tariffs.
Yeah.
Why are we doing that? What are they? Why is it relevant?
I must confess, Jack, I have been living under a rock for the last month. I've been off social media. I haven't looked at the news. I am trying my absolute best to stay calm in the current political climate. And as such, I have, hence the podcast being out so late. But obviously, for those of you that haven't been living under a rock, you'll be probably more than aware of Trump's crusade against his allies. In terms of and this complete attack, essentially economic attack on Canada, Mexico, and China at the moment, and it's likely going to be extended to Europe in the very sort of near future. I mean, it might already have been at this rate. I can't keep up with his absolute blitzkrieg of media warfare. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, so what Trump essentially has done is introduce a bunch of tariffs, for those of you that aren't aware, on Canada, Mexico, and China. And these are essentially taxes on imports. So everything that the US imports is now going to be levied with a tax. So that's literally everything at one point. So it's lumber, wheat, minerals, food, anything you can think about. If you want to buy something from one of those countries, you have to pay an additional 25%. Let's think it. And also, he wants to bring inflation down, but yet his first move as president has been make people pay 25% more. Yeah,
no, it doesn't fit the narrative quite, does it? I mean, he also, has the MAGA thing, Make America Great Again. He doesn't have the Make America Significantly Worse Very Quickly. Campaign. I guess it's less catchy on the cap, isn't it? But yeah, that's essentially what he's going for.
Not quite as catchy. And also, like we said, this is on allies. These are on historical friends. Before it was sort of a crusade against China, Chinese manufacturing, whatever. When now it's a case of Canada and Mexico. So Canada and Mexico now have this 25% levy, where Chinese goods only have 20%. So Canada and Mexico are paying this essentially premium as opposed to what China was going to get, even though they're ideologically aligned, they're geographical neighbors, they're allies. And yet, for some reason, Trump has used this as an excuse to go after his Northern American
absolutely.
Friends.
It felt, at least, out of nowhere. And I don't know. I mean, we're getting into politics now, but I don't know if any of his base actually supports. Were they worried about Canada? Was this on their radar? I don't know.
This is the thing as well. It's so misaligned with what Republicans in the US traditionally think. Republicans in the US tend to be very anti-tax, very anti these sort of frictions being added into the free market, but yet they've all gone along with this sort of protectionist, very outright non-liberal thing to do, very non-libertarian, I should say. And also, can I just point out the scale of these tariffs compared to last time? Because a lot of people sort of say, oh, well, he did this last time, it's all good, whatever. He did it last time and nothing really happened. So last time, he imposed about $300 billion dollars of imports. Okay, tariffs affected about 300 billion of imports, and they were mainly from China. They were not from Canada, Mexico, and the EU. Okay, now it's going to be over $3 trillion worth of imports going to be affected. That is 10% of the US economy is going to have a 25% tariff levied on it. It's 10 times the size as it was last time, numerically. And so it's effectively raising the tariff rate, the average tariff rate, essentially, from 3%, which it is currently, to 19%, which is the highest in modern history. It is unbelievable.
It's huge. And I mean, we're going to later get onto the impact on that on tax, inflation and GDP and things like that. But even just a welfare standpoint, we've got Krugman, who's, the daddy of trade economics.
Never say that again. never say that
Look,
again.
you've had your awkward moment at the beginning of the thing. I can get away with one where I'll do a little bit of an ick, right? But okay, he's great at trade economics. I think he got his Nobel Prize in it, right? And he said that basically tariffs below sort of 5%, if you got rid of them, put it at zero, it's not too bad. Like, it's fine. Even though economists hate tariffs, it's sort of okay. He said the threshold really is when you start getting to 10%. 10%, right? That's when it starts getting bagged. And they said, but worse, that the impact on welfare and the economy is roughly the square of the tariff. So if we're getting to 25%, think how much worse that is than the threshold, he said, when it starts getting bad, which is 10%. I mean, it is huge.
So that's like exponentially growing as time goes on. And so 20% to 25% is such a big difference compared to like 0 to 5% in terms of the impact. So it's absolutely insane. And economists tend to despise tariffs. It's almost what we call like a solved game, in the sense that a lot of economists in particular, are very anti-tariff. I mean, it only creates losers in a lot of cases. And often the way of dealing with the problem the tariff tries to fix is a deeper issue than something a tariff can solve. And we'll obviously get into that a little bit. So did you want to just give an outline as to why economists don't like tariffs, what the problem with them are, why it's just net negative? Why don't we like them?
Right, okay. Let's start with an easy idea of why it's bad. It's because the theory behind it, a lot of the time, especially the sort of blanket tariffs we're talking about with Trump, where it's sort of indiscriminate almost. I know he's rode back on some that you made exemptions and things like that. But it's this idea that exports are good because money's coming into the economy, and imports are bad because money's going out of the economy. Also, it means that the jobs must be going abroad, it must be outsourced if we're buying from abroad and things like that. And it misses the point about how trade works. Is your mic all right, mate? I've seen that the lights.
No, it's fine. Sorry, no, it's all good. It's all good. I was looking for a pen and I didn't want to distract you. So.
Oh, you're writing this down. You're noting it down. Little lecture.
I was gonna. Yeah, I was. Yeah, no, this is gold dust. This is gold dust, mate. I can't let this analysis go.
Believe me, this is not new to anyone at home. This is well defined. As you said, it's sort of a completed game, right? In terms of this, so it's not a zero-sum game.
Jack,
it's
stop
not
speaking. I need to find a pen to write this down.
Yeah, but countries that are in surplus, i.e. they're exporting more than they import, they're considered by these people, especially like Trump, that they're winning at the expense of America, who's a deficit nation, right? And I think it overlooks the point of what's actually going on here, which is in trade we specialise, we produce the things that we've got advantage doing, comparative advantage doing, and they produce the things that they've got advantage doing. And what it means, and we won't go into the technicals of this, is that by trading, we can leverage both parties' abilities, and combined, we both manage to achieve consumption levels of things that we would not have been able to do at just producing it ourselves. And that is as simple as I can put it, I think. But also that this is basically, we're receiving, the way the financial flows go is that the money's leaving because we're spending it on goods. It comes back through investment. So really what's happening here is we're getting a loan to buy things. That's really, if we really get into it, we're getting a loan to buy things.
Yeah, and this is the point I wanted to highlight a little bit, is if you don't think about it in terms of money going in, money going out, and you think about it in terms of goods and services. If you use like the German example, Germany sells a lot of cars to the US. but the US has like a deficit with Germany. So you can almost think about it not in terms of money, like, but economists tend to think in terms of goods and services. And a trade deficit in that case, you can think about is they gave us more cars than we gave them in equivalent value. So in some ways, you can look at a deficit as like you're winning because we've got more stuff than that we gave them. And so we're essentially borrowing from them. And that is essentially how trade works. And the deficit nation, the idea is that you are essentially consuming more than you can produce otherwise. And essentially trade deficits basically come down to who's saving more. It's sort of as simple as that. You know, Germans are notoriously, tight-fisted with their finances. So naturally they have a surplus because they don't consume as much stuff. So they have more stuff to export. You know, it's as simple as that, really. And it's almost just more numerical than it is winners and losers. Like this, Trump thinks this is like a zero-sum game. And free trade's a good thing. And also, you know, the whole Republican ideology is about how free markets are good. But yet they seem to only extend that ideology to their boundaries. They don't extend that, you know, that doesn't change if there's an ocean in between you, you know, it doesn't. And so that's the problem.
I love that you pointed out that it sounds like a pretty good deal. The fact that we're getting more and they're getting less. And I just think that, you know, Trump's all about the art of the deal. I mean, this should seem like a brilliant situation to him. Like, wait, we get an endless loan for buying more stuff. What the hell?
I like to think about economics on an incredibly small scale at times because it can get quite complicated. You can sort of think about this as like an equivalent where you and I are both on separate islands. I produce apples, you produce oranges. And I just freaking love apples and I love oranges. And so I just eat as much as I can. And you're like, oh, you know, I'm indifferent. So I don't really eat it. So you give me a lot of your surplus, you know, trade. And so I've basically taken all your oranges, eaten all of my apples, and then complain that you are winning the trade war. And it's like, it just makes no sense.
I'm aware that a lot of people are going to be screaming at us now, saying that we've sort of missed the point. Maybe it is worth maybe getting into the bits where there is a little bit of an argument there. So I think
absolutely.
So I'd sort of categorise it in my head of like a traffic light system of...
Note for the ladies and gents at home, Jack has just completed a project management course. So if he sounds so insufferable and pretentious, it's because he's just done that. I just wanted to let you know.
The trick to any course is to build a model based on either a shape or an object everyone knows of, and then just make a list and pretend like it's an incredible model. I'm telling you a list, guys, but it's a traffic light, all right? So
I see some motivational speaking in your future, Jack.
But anyway, so I've got green things like reasons why you could have a tariff that maybe are actually justifiable. I've got amber ones, which are things that I personally disagree with, but we can have a chat about it. And these are to do with the effects on employment, so jobs, and also the effect on our, I don't know, foreigners buying up our assets. Is that, you know, a concern or whatever? And then things about infant industry argument. Well, I don't think we'll get to that.
Yeah.
And then we've just covered there the red part of it, which is this idea that blanket tariffs, not targeted at specific industries or problems, are clearly bad because it views it through this zero-sum game thing. So I think we do need to move on to the bits. What would we say, Charlie? Or what would you say? I mean, we may have differing opinions here. What would you say? Someone says, okay, you said about the consumption side, we're buying more. We're getting more cars. That's brilliant. Okay. But we need to have incomes to buy those cars. And a big portion of the country are losing their manufacturing jobs to China or not Canada. This is the problem with the argument. Yeah. I mean, they're not losing it to Canada. But anyway, oh God. But okay, just the China thing.
Yeah. Well, Canada's taken our jobs, so we need to stop them. Yeah. Canada's never taken anyone's jobs. Can I just say that? Sorry to all our Canadian listeners. I love you, really. No, and that's the concern, isn't it? It's the protection of the Rust Belt in the US and these sort of so-called blue-collar jobs that are going to China and whatever. The idea is that although on the surface you may be protecting employment, fundamentally the side of, and you might be able to maintain some level of employment, I believe, in the steel industry, but the effect's going to be marginal, one thing, because fundamentally the structure of the global economy has changed so much that the advantage that China has in producing steel is just too much to overcome with tariffs. It just is. Especially as China is naturally just going to respond with tariffs anyway, netting out any sort of competitive advantage you get. So that's another big deal. That tariffs don't work because the country obviously just responds, and so you don't get any immediate advantage. So it's, whatever. So that's one thing. The other thing is the US economy would be better off not trying to keep jobs that they don't no longer have the advantage in, but trying to reskill, retrain, and move more dynamically towards a new thing where they have a specialization. It's sort of like holding on to the past. It's not going to be good for an economy. And so you do need, and this is sort of going to be my point of the whole episode, I think, which is like, there are some real problems in the economy related to trade, and all of them could be solved by something more concrete than a tariff. Tariff is like putting a plaster on a broken leg. It just doesn't, it's not sufficient to fix the complexity of the issue. And manufacturing is a great example of that. I don't know what you think about it all.
No, I think I resonate with everything you said, right? So the bit for me is that it's going to. We've said that it reduces our ability to consume and things, so it effectively reduces our GDP. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
We'll talk about projections in the future.
Yeah, we will.
So the size of the pie is getting smaller or whatever. And I think if we're using tariffs and we're thinking about it through a inequality lens, you've got to start thinking, well, is there a better policy for dealing with inequality than tariffs? And I think there probably is. Some sort of redistribution, but also, like you said, not necessarily short term. Like short term, you might want to protect these jobs because you can't retrain people instantly. But long term, you can't expect to, like you said, hold on to these industries. I think some sort of investment to make those industries productive again, or move people towards the industries that at their skill level you will have a comparative advantage. I think that's definitely more effective at dealing with the inequality issue than crushing your economy and causing inflation. I think there's better way.
And for sure, for economic reasons and for strategic reasons, you do need to protect some industries. Like the strategic argument is obviously you need steel production, you do need energy supply. I'm going to miss some. You need agriculture, obviously, because these things are super important if you do end up in a situation like we're in now, where there's hostile powers who are threatening your supply of that, right? So you need them for strategic reasons. You might also need them for economic reasons. The idea being in a recession, you don't want to be too one-dimensional, because if the thing that you're relying on, the classic case is countries in sub-Saharan Africa who rely on minerals exclusively. If that is then there's a shock that affects that exclusively, then you've got no resilience. So you should diversify your economy. But I think what we're getting at is that tariffs are not the way to protect industry. The way to protect industry is to direct support to making it more productive and giving it support to actually be build real productivity, as opposed to sort of slapping on these artificial, competitive boosters,
Yeah.
I think that's the main thing.
Because I think it's important that we do address other solutions to this inequality problem, because I don't want to play down this problem that people are facing. People sort of see the Biden campaign as, well, especially if they're on the left or Democrats, being like, I don't get it. He left the economy in a much better state. And if it's this classic thing, it's the economy stupid. Why didn't people like it? It's because the distribution, not everyone benefited from that time. And people are losing the manufacturing jobs. And we do, some of the trade models, hey, I put my hands up, say that through trade, it leads sometimes the low-skilled people in a developed nation will lose out because they're effectively losing their jobs, to China and places like that. So it is real, and we can see it. But I think the point is, what we're saying here is that there's definitely other policies you could pursue that are less damaging.
Absolutely, and I think the retaliation argument for me is just such a big deal. Fundamentally, like that's why no one benefits from a tariff war, because one person puts the tariffs up, another one, and it just sort of spirals upwards. With the policies that we would suggest, yes, they're more difficult and they're difficult to sell. They're not a sort of quick fix, which obviously politics nowadays is sort of more becoming. But they're real solutions. Tariffs are not going to help anyone, where these ones, and I'm not saying there's no losers from trade. Absolutely, people in the blue collar work and manufacturing have lost out in America. But government shouldn't be there to try retain something that is against the winds of sort of change. They really should adjust and adapt through these policies that are much more.
Yeah, I can't remember what the I can't remember what the foundation was that did this, but they were saying how Western countries keep focusing or banging on about manufacturing, and maybe just accepting that isn't the sector that we have comparative advantage anymore, and perhaps there are skills, those level skilled jobs in other sectors like service industry that we can move to, and to keep focusing on protecting an industry that is dying in our country. Perhaps that's like you say, be open to the winds of change.
I mean, I guess you might make the argument that manufacturing is going to be important if there was a war or something. Then it is sort of strategically important. I haven't really considered that argument a huge amount. It's not one that I've heard brought up. But I do wonder if that could be an argument as well. Obviously, that's more important when it comes to advanced manufacturing as opposed to consumer goods manufacturing, which we obviously still, America still does a lot of high-tech manufacturing, as does the EU. So, that's not as much of a problem. But I do understand the concern with that. But fundamentally, there are other ways of dealing with it. I don't know what your thoughts on subsidies are as opposed to tariffs, because obviously tariffs, you're sort of taxing an import, where subsidies, you're making your exports more competitive.
Yeah.
So I don't know what your thoughts.
I think we might disagree on this. I think. So I see subsidies. A lot of the negative effects are very similar to tariffs. I think the only thing, in my opinion, that I've seen that it has over tariffs is that they're less likely to be retaliated. So you can get, like China really... Look, I don't actually have data on this, but it's definitely true that they have been subsidizing a lot of their industries rather than putting tariffs on American goods. And realistically, would they need to put tariffs on American goods? They suck, right? But things like I work in the transport research sector, right? And the electric buses made in China, there's just no way they can be that much cheaper without some sort of subsidy or like some serious workplace problems with their labour, But yeah, so
and also you're right. I mean, my main argument is that one, they're less likely to be retaliated against. Also, I do think subsidies can be sort of productivity improving, in the sense that if you're to subsidize something and you have conditions whereby this subsidy needs to go towards a certain amount of capital investment, it needs to go towards a certain amount of R&D spending, it needs to go on operations management and research and reducing inefficiency. I think if you have subsidies that are sort of act as incentives to invest and almost give them a support, and this sort of we won't go too much into it, I don't think, but the infant industry argument, whereby this was the growth of the southern tiger economies in Asia. It was very centrally planned, and the idea was, we'll pick the car industry, the tech industry, and we're going to support them through subsidies and productivity improving measures, because it would be unfair to expose them to the winds of international competition early, and so I think subsidies are probably preferred to tariffs, especially if there's these conditions attached to them. But you don't necessarily agree with that, I don't think.
So if we're going to merge this into the infant industry argument,
I think
so.
I think it works.
Do you want to just define that a little bit more concretely? What the infant industry argument is?
So the infant industry argument basically says, if you're a developing country and you want to grow and you want to develop your own industry, then it's sort of unfair to expose your own companies and industries to international competition, because these countries have had centuries of developing these industries to be essentially ruthlessly efficient. And so if you're a developing country, you don't want to expose all of your industry to that immediately without any level of support. It's like having training wheels on your bike, and then what you do is you gradually take the training wheels off. And this is a theory purported by sort of development economists. And like I said, this was sort of the framework followed by the exponential growth of the Asian tiger economies. So South Korea, the other one, Singapore. These sort of countries.
The export-led countries did use this technique.
That was very.
And I understand. Yeah. So linking this to both the infant industry argument and what you've said about using subsidies instead, I think my argument would be that this isn't actually a trade specific policy for me. It's like, for me, this is a problem with imperfect competition where small companies can't be a startup because they're competing against huge giants. This is a problem not specific to trade. So I would like something, I don't know, like the EU that could have had these rules that had standardized for everyone that under these circumstances you can have subsidies to stop big companies just dominating wherever they are. And I think that doesn't need to be specifically trade related. That can be within countries as well. So, and it's the same for me for if you said using subsidies to enhance the productivity of certain industries. I'm all for that, but I don't see why it has to be specific to certain, that we as a government have to pick this one's the one that needs the extra subsidies. I'm wondering, is there a more standardized approach to making sure that we're not steering the market and we're actually letting it find, we subsidize according to merit.
Yeah, no, I understand that for sure. I mean, it is a bit of a hit or miss game, and it's all a bit of an art as opposed to a science, these things, isn't it? I mean, it's an interesting argument. I'm sorry, mate, I completely forgot the last. I was going to say something and I completely forgot it. What did you just say? I'll cut this.
That's all right, Charlie. Oh God, no, you've done it to me. It's contagious.
I know.
I can't.
I was listening as well, and I had a really good point.
That it should be a general.
Sorry. I remember. Sorry.
No,
my only argument against the whole, the EU should. This isn't a specific to trade. I would argue it almost is, because you have an added political economy, like game theory thing going on here, where the EU can't necessarily impose these laws because it reduces the competitiveness of their own industry compared to that of like China and Russia and these countries, and so you put yourself at like a geopolitical disadvantage. And so I think you have this game theory issue. If everyone, it's like a corporate tax thing, isn't it? If everyone did it, then you're right, 100% it'd be great. But the problem is, it's this competition between countries that I just think would make it too difficult. I do understand your argument.
I think we're getting back to
and let the free market doing it for you, but it's difficult.
I think we're getting back to this whole problem with trade, that it is people see it as a zero-sum game, and in these cases, the political economy side, it is. And there's something called prisoner's dilemma in game theory, and it applies perfectly here. I won't explain it, but it's the point that everyone's optimal actions individually lead to a bad situation, but if we all colluded, would it be in a better situation? And I think that's a perfect example here, Charlie, where you said, if we did this globally, if we had the standards globally, it would be much better. But the point is, we're not global. We do have blocks. We've got China versus Europe versus North America, and in that case, maybe you've got to think more strategically. But the point I guess I'm making is, it's suboptimal. This is not what we want. Please, can we work towards a better solution?
Exactly. Yeah. And to be honest, it sort of ties us back quite nicely of like the politics has made the economics not work. And that's sort of every road you take down this route is true for sure. And you make an excellent point. I also just want to talk about in terms of like the politics of tariffs. Obviously, Trump is using this as a bit of a political bargaining token, and he's like, the art of the deal or whatever, And
can't take that seriously.
But fundamentally, it's such a short-sighted strategy, because by losing economic cohesion, I was listening to an economist recently who was saying, I think it was Paul Krugman actually, who was saying you can't think about the economy of America or the economy of Canada or the economy of Mexico. It's a North American economy. These trading relationships have been completely free trade and built up. Because remember, these countries used to be in a free trade agreement, I believe. So now the reversion back to, these economies have had relationships built up over centuries, and now you've just taken an axe to them, and it's like sort of putting tariffs between us and the North, or us and Wales, or us and Scotland. It just doesn't make sense. And so what happens inevitably over the long term is that you get this reduction in political power as people separate from you, and it's a short-term win. Maybe that's all Trump cares about, but in terms of the long term, it's going to be really painful. I mean, you sort of see what's happening with military reliance now moving away from America. It's going to cause a lot of distrust of American supremacy, and it might cause a lot more competition for American supremacy, which, if their economy collapses, is not going to be an easy thing to fix. And fundamentally, you're going to be reduced political power. You're going to be able to pull fewer levers on the Middle East, on Russia, on China than you used to be able to. And also, Trump said, the Ukrainian war doesn't affect us. He doesn't seem to think that if it's over, we've got this big, beautiful ocean in the Middle East, what he said. But fundamentally, the whole story of the last 5 years has been international events do affect America. That's the whole reason that we're in this situation. So he has no idea what he's talking about fundamentally. Everything he says is a contradiction.
It is. Yeah, it doesn't fit the narrative.
I mean, this was a really famous argument proposed by like Keynes in his Economic Consequences of Peace, where he argues against the Treaty of Versailles. And he basically argues that strict economic warfare makes war more likely because there's less of an incentive to remain friends. And, you know, it's the path we're going. It's you know, history rhymes. And it's, you know, it's not.
Yeah,
it's
so
pretty.
not only, just to summarise, not only are you losing influence with the people that aren't China, because obviously China will fill this gap now and be bigger trade partners, but we also lose ability to have a conversation with China, really, because we're less connected and integrated. So yeah, on both sides, God, it's just horrendous.
So no one wins. Literally, no one wins. The West doesn't win. The East doesn't win.
It's not good. Do you want? We'll really get into the end here. So, do you want to go into the short-term effects? So we're talking like inflation, GDP. Do you have that up?
Oh yes. Yeah, because also, so basically, this is the other thing we haven't really spoken about is these are going to cause massive price rises. Because let's say everything is built from microchips, everything is built from semiconductors, everything's built from steel, everything's built from something, and all of these things are now being taxed. So it's not just like, oh, we're just paying more on steel. That then affects your computer costs. It affects building costs. If you're importing cars, that affects mechanics cost. You know, everything feeds. The economy's circular. So basically, all of these forecasts basically focus on this is some of the most inflationary thing you can do. You know, so Moody's. I'm going to use the Moody's Analytics global model, which is one of the most comprehensive structural models in forecasting. And so they predict higher inflation, core consumer prices rising by 1.1% at peak impact. Producer prices are going to rise by about 6%. And this is gonna affect food, transport, and manufacturing. They're gonna be hard. So that's what's so funny. Manufacturing is going to be the hardest hit. There you go, straight out of the gate. I mean, it hasn't helped them at all. GDP growth will falling well below 1%, so it's barely going to grow. And they're going to get a mild recession by late 2025. That's what they predict. And also, exports are going to decline, worsening the trade deficit. Anyway, so all of this has literally not even made the trade deficit any better. And so that's going to peak unemployment at about 5.5%. And that's going to affect manufacturing and construction the worst. Again, I mean, everyone he was trying to help. And as opposed to the previous baseline forecast, they were going to lose 900,000 jobs compared to what they were going to lose in 2026. Also, interest rates are going to have to stay higher for longer because of this added price pressure. And given that the government's going to have to borrow more because of the slowing economic activity, this is going to push debt over 110% of GDP. And they're going to raise 300 billion in revenue. But that's all going to be outweighed by the increased spending. So they're going to widen the budget deficit. They're also going to have stock prices declining by up to 7%.
This is not financial advice.
And these negative wealth effects are going to... And then obviously this just doesn't even start to take into account that they're going to retaliate. So even without the retaliation, this is going to happen. And this is sort of the best case scenario. So... I mean, it's not going to be good.
Presumably the tax revenue disappears pretty quickly after like 1 or 2 years, right? Because like if it works in the way he wants, it's going to reduce the amount of things you import. So you end up bringing in less tax revenue anyway. So it's but it's also if you make
sense. And so what he was saying, well, sorry, lagged. He at one point said, "Oh, I want to replace income tax with tariffs." And you're exactly right. The problem is the tariffs would have to be so unbelievably high that people are just going to stop buying from them. And then their tariff revenue will just tend towards zero. And then you have no tax revenue. So the guy has no idea what he's on about. I think we like to try and be objective here. But none of this makes any sense. Apart from...
it's a nice, easy topic, actually, this one. Because that normally I try and justify some things he did as if he knew what was going on. Realistically, I don't think he actually has this clear strategy or whatever. But and this time, like, I've had my traffic light system. I had the amber things of things we could talk about or whatever. Luckily, all his stuff just falls straight in the red. It's brilliant. It's so easy. You could just be like, no, pretty much no ambiguity to this. This is clearly quite bad. And And with the
Yeah.
forecasts thing, I know that, look, economists, when it comes to macroeconomic stuff, so, the whole economy, we're quite bad at predicting things into the future just because there's a lot of uncertainty. I think the thing to remember here is that it's quite clear, both empirically and theoretically, that compared to what it would have been if we didn't bring these tariffs in, that is quite clearly going to be inflation and quite clearly going to be lower GDP and quite clearly going to be higher debt. These are not things that, economists always get it wrong going forward. These are quite simple things to predict.
Yeah. And also, you bring up a really good point, which I think no one ever mentions this point, which is compared to what it would have been. Like, let's say the economy ends up doing really well in 2026 because, I don't know, we mine minerals from Mars or something and they all come back. That's not a result of Trump doing well. None of this makes any sense. It will not improve the economy. Even the people closest to him know that this won't improve it. Even he himself has admitted that there's going to be short-term turbulence, quote unquote. And so even he knows it's going to be a freaking disaster. And yet, if somehow, by some miracle, everything works out, that is not because of him. It would have been better under someone else. And that's the thing that people don't ever talk about, especially with the last Trump years. It's like, the Trump did really well. It's like, no, he did worse than it would have otherwise been. And that's the thing. You can't look at X and Y and go, X is different from Y because it is. No, it's not because of that. It's because you got to look at unrealized outcomes as well. So.
Yeah. Luckily, Charlie, though, normally the policies are small enough that we can't really untangle which affects, how much of it was that and how much is just external facts. Luckily, the tariff is so huge that we can, it's probably going to outweigh all the other things that are going to affect the economy. So maybe we could have more certainty. I don't know, but yeah. Charlie, I know.
Let's just go back to talking about capital gains tax. And
People love it.
It was a simpler time.
Yeah,
it was so much nicer.
So Charlie, can I just if we are finishing here, can I just list? I don't even want to go into detail on them. Just the positive pros to tariffs, and these are literally for me as simple and as short as if the geopolitical reasons, such as you need economic sanctions because China started genociding someone. Or self-sufficiency because of fears of war or pandemics. That's a good reason. If you're retaliating against other countries who have, crazy tariffs on you or have ridiculous regulations on your products, then that's another example. And then I think as a form of short-term stabilization, you could perhaps suggest a tariff, but I still think there are better options. In fact, I might even move that into the amber category of something that I think there's probably better support that you can give than a tariff. So there you go. It's really short.
Let's leave it there. I'm going to go back to my cave in the dark room and rock for the next 4 months. So we'll do another episode in 2026.
Yeah, exactly.
See how it goes.
Lovely stuff. Right, I'll see you then, Charlie.
Yeah, good to see you, mate, in a bit.